Okay, like I said, the meetings are going to record, the video will record, and Ms. Rivera will record over here, so everything is legitimate. It's just, if you come to the podium to talk, please speak loudly, and we'll get business done. First thing we're going to do is we're going to have a Pledge of Allegiance, and Tony Ramos, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Tony.
Turn your mic on. No, it's not. But
Okay, we're going to move on to any action taken out of closed session, Mr. Garber.
Yes, sir. The board directed real estate negotiators with regard to items 1, 2, and 3 on the agenda at letter C, and also staff reported, and I'm reporting that a Western Farmland purchase transaction closed. It's 2,519.28 acres in Nyland, sold to an entity called Al Dara Farms USA LLC for a price of $14,008,303, and that closed between the last board meeting and this board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. We were going to move on to special presentations. We have special project grant program checks for the schools, and will the board please come down to the front?
Ok, pues está bien. Está bien.
Hi, good afternoon. First, we have Raleigh Elementary School District in the amount of $1,000, and Superintendent Ron Garcia is here to receive the check.
Bring your principal up too. Mr. Brian Taylor, the principal of Phil Swing School.
Come on over, and then you guys
Yeah.
both can take the
Okay.
picture.
That's it? Oh, okay. Okay, okay. Okay, you got it. All right, Ron. This is my first time, so how are you doing? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, Ron.
You guys gotta get in the middle over here. Okay, you in the middle, you're gonna hold the check.
All right.
The check's on the back there.
Can I just say it's nice to come to a meeting where you know you're going to be treated nice and
Don't let her become a board member.
Get up here, boy, guys.
No, they are working? Try it.
Testing.
Kevin, you need
They're not working. Get back to you.
No, you can't hear it, but it will record. And I think that's what he wants.
Oh, okay.
I get these things, right?
Okay, good. Oh, this is the whole thing's right? Fantastic, thank you.
Next, Silly Union School District in the amount of $1,000, and Superintendent Ruben Castro and Chief Business Official Lola Larios are here to receive the check.
You got pizza?
You're welcome. Thank you for your good work. Westmoreland Union Elementary School in the amount of $1,000, and Superintendent Linda Morse is here to receive the check. Meadows Union School District in the amount of $1,000, and a school board member, Anastasia Miki, is here to receive the check.
Thank you very much for your generosity.
Heber Elementary School District. I'm sorry.
Well, this is ridiculous. These are the in lieu of taxes that IID would have paid if not for its nonprofit status. So these are in the second year in which we're doing, and they're grants, and they're proportionate, and we're glad to do it. And this is Veronica from the water department. She's doing a stellar job
Thank you.
under difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Okay, thank you. Next, Heber Elementary School District in the amount of $1,000, and Superintendent Jaime Silva is here this afternoon to receive the check.
Nothing we can do, but at least it's being recorded.
Okay, okay, thank you. We'll get it fixed by next week, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Next, El Centro Elementary School District in the amount of $1,000, and Superintendent Robert Pleca is here to receive the check.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Central Union High School District in the amount of $2,000, and Band Director Renee Baker is here to receive the check. It's not working. That's not work. McCabe Union Elementary in the amount of $2,700, and Christy Mayo is here to receive the check.
No. You're doing fine. Don't worry.
Okay. They can hear me?
They can hear you. They're not amplifying.
Magnolia Union Elementary School District in the amount of $5,000, and Superintendent Lane Smith is here to receive the check. Okay, it's Leslie, I'm sorry. Calexico Unified School District in the amount of $8,300, and Superintendent Richard Fregali is here to receive the check.
Actually, 3 more zeros and we'd be whole.
I'm gonna get it from here.
Elementary School District in the amount of $9,100, and Superintendent Dan Adams is here to receive the check. Hootville Unified School District in the amount of $10,000, and Assistant Superintendent Celso Reese is here to receive the check. Raleigh Union High School District in the amount of $17,500, and Superintendent Dr. Dan De Leon is here to receive the check. Thank you.
So it's done, that.
Imperial Unified School District in the amount of $21,500, and Juan Leal and Brian Thomason are here to receive the check. Imperial County Office of Education in the amount of $16,300, and Superintendent of Schools Ann Mallory is here to receive the check. And last but not least, Calipatria Unified School District in the amount of $40,900, and Superintendents Klein and School Board President Carlos Estrada are here to receive the check.
And also, board member Glenn Sampson.
Yeah, hey Glenn, get over here.
That's right. Hey, good to meet you. General Manager Kelly did a great job explaining how it's distributed, and it is proportionate. It's proportionate because Calipat's a favorite, and we got the biggest. I should have been clearer.
I would like to recognize Erin Garcia, Director of Fiscal Advisory Services for the Imperial County of Education, the IID Committee, Rosa Huerta, Financial Accountant, Teresa Perez, Business Control Analyst, Greg Roking, Jennifer Goodsell, and the IID Board of Directors for making the 2012 Special Grant Program possible. Oh, the same. Oh, yeah.
Now we want to see you. We get to see you this good morning.
Good job, Dan.
We should have announced it to Congress. Very much.
That one.
Yeah. Tough. That was tough. Yeah. Pretty good suit. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm going to wait a few minutes until the crowd clears out, and then we'll go on with the meeting.
It's on.
Testing. Is it?
Okay, we're going to continue with the meeting, and the first thing we're going to have is the approval of the order and agenda items.
President Mendia, I'd like to move number 18 from action to information.
Okay. Is there a second to the approval?
I'll second that.
Okay. Please vote.
I hope it's working.
Okay, everybody needs to turn their mics on because it appears to be working again.
I believe that the microphones are working.
Stella, you need to turn your mic on.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, then the next thing we're going to have is public comments. If anybody has any public comments, step to the podium, state your name for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Erin Moyola, CoLab, Imperial County. Recently, as you know, CoLab requested the complete information regarding the last 2 years of contract bidding information. We got it, but after taking it to 3 different professional sources for analysis, we find that it is unusable, incomplete, and violates the Records Request Act per our letter. We know, and you know, that the IID has left tens of millions of dollars annually on the table for years by making politically motivated decisions and consistently choosing the higher bidder. This board can try to change their policies and cover up the numbers by not providing us with accurate information, but enough is enough, and we will follow through on this issue to see true change at the IID. I would hope that board members would follow up and see what information was provided to us and that it was incomplete and inaccurate and unable to be analyzed by professionals who do this on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back.
Mr. Ramos.
Oh, Mr. Ramos, go ahead.
Tony Ramos, a Central resident. For a cough thing there. Anyway, Do we have 3 minutes, Mr. Chairman, or 5
You
minutes?
have 5 minutes.
You know what? Erin is my friend here, but I do tend to differ with her in an article that came out on March 11th where it says CoLab is trying to educate the people on how best the people get served through the IED. You see, to me, CoLab, the Imperial Group, and Imperial Valley First is the same entity. They're all the same one. And there's nothing wrong with me saying that because I'm not saying something personal about Myola or Mike Morgan or anything. They strive to better themselves, whereas Mr. Sanchez, Ms. Mendoza, and Mr. Menville strive to better the people. The water belongs to the people, and there'd be no doubt about that. It belongs to all of us. You know, the pie belongs to everybody, whereas this group wants to get the whole pie and leave only a little bit for the rest of the valley. To me, you know, it's very important, and it's coming out on hopefully on national TV. But it's very important that we maintain and keep John Manville and Stella Mendoza to fulfill the job as directors in the upcoming election. Without them, this valley is going to sink. It's going to be turned into another Owens Valley because that's what they did in L.A. in the 20s or 30s. They built an aqueduct and misled the people back then to buy the land so they could build the aqueduct, and now there's no Owens Valley. And that's what's going to happen to Imperial Valley if we have anybody less than these three people. You know, this afternoon when I started the Pledge of Allegiance, I asked Mr. Menville if I could start up the Pledge of Allegiance because I'm an American. My color, my size, and the way I look, it doesn't matter because we're all immigrants. We all came here from another country. The only are the Native Americans. So to me, I also served in the Air Force. Proud to have served in the Air Force, 1966 to 1970. But I come back and I find that there's differences in all of us. You know, the differences in the Republican Party, which is the Tea Party, and the Democrats, which are the Democrats. And most important to me right now is that we maintain and keep Stella Mendoza and John Pierre Menville in this position, because if we know what's going to happen, Mr. Kelly and this young man here are going to be left out in the cold. They don't represent these people. County Council and General Council and Mr. Kelly represent the people. To me, without them, you know, it's going to go back to how it was going to be years ago, where you keep getting another CEO, another person, year after year. And with the way it is right now, this is what the Valley needs: is people like them. And believe it or not, people, I have nothing to gain from this. I don't work for nobody. I don't put money in my pocket for nobody. I've always professed and done everything towards helping people. Even when I've protested against the judges last year, the way they treated probation, you know, it was all for the people, not for me. And to me, the most important thing about being American is that you can speak freely and not get killed over it. If I talked this way in Mexico, I wouldn't be here right now. You know, so to me, even though I disagree with Mr. Desert and Mr. Hanks about where they stand, we can disagree, but I don't dislike them. You know, they're good-looking guys, really. You know, and to me, leaving CoLab and leaving the Imperial Valley First and the Imperial Group in charge of this is like letting Colonel Sanders take care of your chickens. It's not going to happen. You know. To me, let's not worry about chickens and about the other side. Let's worry about people. People are real. People come here and protest or contest anything, and you can do it. There's nothing wrong with me disagreeing with Myola. She said right now that she didn't like a report that IID turned in. Well, I'm not familiar with that. I would comment on it. But I'm sure that Mr. Consul, you gave them what they wanted, right?
Whatever you say, Tony.
Yeah. Well, Mr. They got what they wanted, right?
Yes, but apparently
obviously,
she's not happy with it.
Obviously, but obviously in her terms she didn't, and maybe she's got a way to contest that and say, you know what, we need more information. Then give her their information, because IID and us being part of you guys, we got nothing to hide. Isn't that true, Mr. President?
Yeah, we're supposed to be transparent.
Yeah, we're supposed to be transparent. That's what I said. The word fat, be fair, accountable, and transparent. That spells out fat, but it doesn't mean we're fat. It means you have to be all of that to be a good guy. And Stella and JP, usually I don't talk about politics here, but I'll tell you what, and I'm telling the people, vote for these two people. Let's not let the water rates and the price go up again, and let's keep the water here. Let's keep our water here for the valley, because of all things, who wants to sell water when you live in the desert? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Anybody else for public comments? Okay, thank you. I'll bring it back to the board. And we'll have, I'll start with Director Sanchez. Okay, Director Mendoza.
No comment.
Director Desert.
No comment today.
Director Hanks.
Election time always makes it interesting, public comment time. For the record, Mr. Tony, I don't think you've ever asked me my position on water. If I had my way, there wouldn't be one drop leaving Imperial Valley. I'd also like to ask the board to consider moving next Tuesday's board meeting to 1 o'clock. We were handed an invitation to the Imperial Valley Press. The CEO, Tom Schertz, is going to be in town on Tuesday, 5:30 to 7:30. And I know, for one, I've been looking for the opportunity to meet him, and I would ask that we change this meeting, our 5 o'clock meeting, to 1 o'clock so we could attend this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Hanks. The only comment I have is that I just wanted to quickly read into the record a letter from Assemblyman Manuel Perez, and it's addressed to the Board of Directors. And it says, please accept my heartfelt thanks to the Imperial Irrigation District for allowing us the use of the William R. Conant Auditorium for the Select Committee hearing on renewable energy economy in rural California and for hosting a pre-hearing luncheon on Friday, March the 16th. The event was a huge success, in part due to the support of you and your staff. It was a great opportunity to gather and discuss opportunities and challenges for Southern California's renewable energy development. It is my hope that the constituents who attended left with a feeling that they were able to voice their concerns and ideas about the local development of renewable energy so that we can work together to meet the 33% renewable portfolio standard by 2020 and improve the quality of life in the 18th Assembly District. Again, thank you for all of your generosity. I look forward to working with you again in the future. Sincerely, Manuel Perez, Assemblyman, 80th District. Okay, do we have any comments from the General Manager?
Yes, President Minville, members of the board, I'm pleased that the board has decided to treat item number 18 as informational today. The board will note that there's a workshop immediately following open session today on the economic development-based wheeling rate. There have been a couple of stakeholder meetings. There is still opportunity for comment from stakeholders and the public. I do want to remind the board that this rate is very important for the planned build-out of our own transmission initiative, and if there are elements that have changed in the economic development-based wheeling rate, it's entirely within the board's purview to change them back. That's all.
All right, thank you.
From the General Manager. Kevin, with this idea that Mr. Hanks has approached about moving the next board meetings, would it be prudent to take action on that now, or should we wait till the end of the meeting? With such a long agenda item, we have a large audience. I don't know who's going to filter in and filter out.
I would think without objection that we would just have the Secretary change the time.
Yeah, Gloria, you just take care of it, please.
So the next meeting will be 1 o'clock Tuesday next week.
Okay, Mr. Garber, you have any comments?
No comments, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the consent. Approval of the consent.
Second.
Okay, we move second. Please vote.
I'd like a correction on the minutes, please.
Okay.
On page 31, paragraph 4, there was a misquote on the fourth paragraph, second sentence. I did mention something about Path 42, but my concerns was that the melt signal bypass would kill the Path 42 project.
Okay, Gloria, you'll take care of that. Okay, thank you. Please vote. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to, and Mr. Kelly, on the item number 18, it's going to be information. We'll take that at the time it comes up in the action, correct?
It'll stay in the action part of the agenda, but you won't vote.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll move on to information. The first item is water general matters. Mr. Silva?
Yes. On our following request, it was the last date for people to sign up. We have about 100,000 acre feet committed. We would like to have at least 150,000 this year. We'd need about 170, but we think that if we had at least 150, we could at least keep moving and catch up next year. So based on that we're still short, we would intend to come back to the board at the next meeting to ask to up the payment for the fallowing by another $25 to bring it up to 125. So anyway, that's what we propose to do that next year to try to get our number up. Also on our water use, we've started off the year. As of yesterday, we're about 61,000 over our schedule. So it looks like we're probably going to be about the same as what we were last year as far as overuse from our limit. That's all I have.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Silva?
Yeah, I have a question. Jesse, if we move the amount that we're going to pay these people, the farmers, for fallowing their ground, is that new price that if we move forward to $125, is that new price going to be the same price that everyone gets?
For everyone, yes.
So everybody's getting the same deal?
Yes. We would have to make it all the same, yes.
Okay, thank you.
On the projection of the overrun, are we going to take any steps mid-year to try to slow that down? Maybe some type of regulation on pre-flooding, or?
Yeah, and also we're hoping that when we get these fallowing contracts, it'll start showing up also in the water use. So we need to kind of wait for that to start happening, and then we'll see what it looks like.
Yeah, I was just curious if we shouldn't challenge our water advisory board to give us a recommendation there. I don't know on certain crops whether they could have agree to a carryover day, once in a lifetime of the crop or something.
The meeting is next Thursday. Let me bring up and ask their advice on what kind of things that we could do. Okay. I'll do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Silva. We'll move on to item number 3, which is temporary water conservation for non-agriculture projects program, and Tina Shields is going to handle that. Tina?
Hi, I'm bringing to you today a conceptual plan for a policy we hope to have brought back to the board later on this month, and just to make folks aware of what we're working on and have it out there so that we can take fast action on it when we do bring it forward. We had back in 2008, 2009, in the development of the Integrated Regional Water Management Plan, brought forth some policy ideas about some coordinated land use and water supply principles and ability to develop those into long-term water supply alternatives that could be used to supplement the interim water supply policy. In the course of that, the problem became with the short-term commitments that the projects were adhering to as far as conditional use permits as opposed to zone changes. It was really limiting in our ability to develop water supply projections and use those water for projects that may become more permanent should they go out of production or should the project terminate sooner than anticipated. So it was really difficult for us to move that process forward. As a result of that, we've kind of changed course, and particularly with the development of the solar projects in particular, and potentially other renewable energy projects that are yet to be as in the forefront as those we see these days, we are looking at developing a conversion of land use fallowing program policy. And we're hoping that this will take advantage of a lot of the targeted marketing and development efforts that are going out there, particularly for the solar project. So when we looked at this, what we have to look at primarily is the definition of fallowing. Then there's 4 water codes that I've outlined on this slide that define how you interpret land conservation and land fallowing. The first statute, 1011, is a temporary program that relates primarily to normal agricultural production. So we didn't feel that this type of land conversion program would fall under that guideline. The second code that relates to fallowing is not particularly relevant because it's shorter term leases in less than 5 years. And then the third water code, 1745, requires an allocation, so that's not something that we would be prepared to address at this time in this type of a program. But we did come across a definition of land fallowing in Water Code Section 1013, which was legislation that was crafted in conjunction with the QSA agreements and facilitated some other processes, but it also revised the definition of fallowing. And this is the definition that's in that water code. And what it does is expands the definition and makes it temporary or long-term fallowing, as well as removes that constraint that talks about normal agricultural production. It talks about regardless of whether this fallowing is occurring in the course of normal production. So it really provides some opportunities that we're looking to take advantage of. This slide is intended to address some other concerns that may have come up and some limitations to see how broad we can make this type of a program. We did look at the Colorado River Water Supply Delivery Agreement, which is the federal QSA document, and there was no specific text in there that we felt would prohibit this type of a program. Additionally, that QSA legislation 1013 that I mentioned applies for the duration of the QSA, which would work well with the terms that these projects are being permitted under, which at least the majority of the projects we've seen have been 30-year conditional use permits with some renewal options. Additionally, the QSA contracts and the agreement with San Diego allows for this water to be transferred. We feel that to meet the San Diego County requirements, there would have to be a waiver because there's a 15-year limitation on fallowing. And the Coachella agreement water, there is no preclusion on fallowing, so that this water could be used to meet Coachella obligations. Part of the Coachella agreement allows water to go to Met if Coachella defers. If that were to happen, there would be additional environmental required. But as long as the water were transferred for purposes of Coachella, it would meet the requirements of that contract. And this would be in addition to the board's general management authority to use that water for its own purposes within its boundaries, to use it to supplement the IWSP, particularly for cap management, and possibly even for some storage opportunities or intentionally created surplus or overrun opportunities. So what we're intending to do is develop that policy that provides you with that broader flexibility, and then on an annual basis we can make decisions, or at least some shorter to longer term decisions once we have this in place and have a better understanding of the amount of participation we would have. The middle bullet talks about the different provisions in this 1013 legislation. The two primary provisions that we need to look at is a mitigation plan that the board would have to be adopted, and we do that with all of our programs, and in fact have that with the current fallowing program. Additionally, Imperial County is the CEQA lead agency on the existing projects and future projects as far as renewable energy, and to the extent that their analysis already covers the primary areas of concern, then really that box is already being checked, and we would look to tier off of that. Similarly, Coachella transfers are covered in our existing environmental permits. And then the final permit or contractual legislative obligation is a coordination effort that IID needs to coordinate with Imperial County in order to obtain their assessment of the economic impacts as well as the environmental impacts. So we would need to do that. And in fact, I think our general manager has had some preliminary conversations with staff representatives, and we will be initiating that as we have more program details. So initially, we're going to be looking at doing a solar land valuing program, but it's going to be a broader conversion of use policy, so it won't be limiting to that as new projects are developed. We're developing the policy and contracts and hope to bring those to the board later this month. I think what we're anticipating at this time, and it may change, but my thoughts is that the existing water supply agreement templates will be modified somewhat to have some references to this policy. It's really not going to change how we handle that contracting process, but it will acknowledge this program, and to the extent that we can have the developers help facilitate participation in this, we'll use that tool. The other document that will be prepared is a land fallowing contract that the landowners will be responsible for being signatories to. The benefit to the landowners is I've been receiving a lot of phone calls from owners that are somewhat hesitant to lease their properties out and asking questions about long-term certainty and can I provide them with a will serve letter for 30 years from now. Not knowing what's happening from 30 years from now, it's very difficult to provide those level of assurances because things change and conditions change and boards change and policies change. So this would allow us some opportunities to preserve those landowners' future right to service via this contract. The other condition is the lands need to be warranted that they're going back into agriculture. That's already a conditional use permit requirement. Many of these projects, and maybe all of them, are required to put up bonding funds so that if the project were for some reason to not reach its full term, the infrastructure could be removed and the lands could go back into agricultural production. So we're going to include that language in there that acknowledges that and is sort of their promise to go back into that ag production in the future. And I think that's all I have. We'll be bringing this back to you as soon as we can. I'm not sure we'll get it in time for the next board meeting, but definitely after that. If there's any questions.
Any board questions for Tina?
Yeah, I have a question. Tina, we cite these statutes, and it seems to be going over pretty positively with our legal team that's reviewing this. That'll open the door for us to do this solar fallowing. My concern is that we're limiting ourselves in our original intent of that solar fallowing just to the Coachella area of the QSA deal. I think we should go for everything, throw it into for fallowing across the board on the QSA. Mr. Ramos spoke earlier about utilizing our water and utilities for their best use, and it is only prudent that we attempt to go all the way on the solar fallowing. We're going to have a fight on our hands with Med over this issue. This will give us some negotiation room if we have fall back on the Coachella aspect of it. But for me, you're going to keep hearing the same comment from me is we should go for everything on the solar fallowing, especially as positively as it's been received by our legal staff that worked and put together the original QSA.
And I think the policy will allow you that flexibility. It's just in order to use that water for purposes of San Diego or potentially for Met, there's additional hoops you'd have to jump through. You'd need a waiver for San Diego and need the sequel coverage from Met.
The waiver from San Diego doesn't seem like it would be that difficult. The environmental that you have to do. And as long as you do the environmental, then you could move forward with Met as well.
Well, it's my interest to see that we go for everything we can with this,
sure, and
rather than limit ourselves or paint ourselves into a corner or a box and say that we can't because of perceived environmental or perceived interpretations of water transfer requirements per the QSA.
Okay, so when we do the policy language, I'll look to make sure that we keep that really broad. And then ultimately, it'll become a board decision on, where do we target that water on a year-to-year basis.
Any further board member comments from Tina?
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments. Let me see if I got this clear. Are you proposing any revenues go to conserving water on the solar projects?
That's not what we were proposing. Our intent is to have this be revenue neutral for the participants, that they're interested in these solar leases or other project leases. They have their own funding mechanism from that standpoint.
Okay, you mentioned about a covenant to return water to the land. I'm very concerned that 25, 30 years later, no matter what the best intentions are, that we can return water that's being used somewhere else for 25, 30 years back to the ground that it was removed from. I'm very concerned about the type of contract language that will assure that. And you can rest assured that the landowners are going to expect that. If it's in a contract 25, 30 years from now. But we don't know what the situation is going to be on the river. We don't know what our entitlements are going to be. And I think we got to be real careful with the language we put in there, making those guarantees.
Have legal that's participating in the contract development, and I anticipate that it's not going to be a specific volume or quantity, that it will be a right to service in the future.
It'll be something along the lines of a right to service pursuant to IID board policies at the time. The problem is no one knows what's going to happen in 30 years. You're right, Director Hanks. And these properties would be in line for service based on whatever equitable rules were in place at that time.
And you're talking about mitigation on this being interim land fallowing. I think the mitigation should have been handled by the county whenever they issued the land use change, the land use variance. That was their responsibility, not the IIDs.
Correct. We intend to tear off of what they've done because most of their findings are consistent with what the recommendations will be.
Director Hanks, that's actually the direction in which the county has already set out, because those conditional use permits that have already either been issued or are going to be issued contemplate that the mitigation is already in place.
Yeah, I just saw a conditional use permit. I don't remember which project. It actually called out that it was an economic benefit to the community, and that language is in the permit.
But we will have to enter into contracts with the solar people for water on the ground, plus contracts with the landowners.
Well,
is that correct?
I think the landowner has to agree that they're not going to be taking raw water service on the land during this time period. Otherwise, we can't legitimately have a fallowing circumstance. We have that same problem anyhow when we're providing IWSP water to a commercial user on the same land that used to be ag land. And we probably were going to have to require that anyhow because we can't deliver to both at the same time. Usually the water card sort of takes care of that for us because the water card gets shifted over to the commercial user. But I think we wanted to do something formal, even if we weren't doing this fallowing program.
Well, I'm just very concerned, because whenever you're talking about issuing water to two groups, one for purposes of land fallowing, another one, and we've had no historical documents or data to base what is reasonable beneficial use for a solar project. I think that becomes an issue too that we're going to have to be very careful.
Are you talking about in terms of fixing a baseline for it?
Yes.
That is an issue, and it's our intention to bring this back, ideally as an informational item next week, with a policy and with a form.
It's not going to happen. And the issue on CEQA, remember, even though the county did CEQA, our decision to enter or to provide this policy for this program, it has CEQA implications. To the extent that the county's analysis covered the same issues, we can use it, but we still have to go through the CEQA process. We still have to do a CEQA document. We can tier on the county's document, but we still have to go through that process. And that's what we've been doing on the IWSP. Typically, when we enter into an IWSP decision to provide water service, it has an environmental impact, but the county already did analysis of those impacts, so we use their work, but we still go through the CEQA process.
Any further questions from the board? Okay, Brad, you have a question or a comment?
It's being sent to us by 5 today.
Just a couple of quick comments. It's not working, right?
It's working. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Is it? Okay. Brad Porres for County of Imperial and also Imperial County Air Pollution Control District. Is that better?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Just a couple of quick comments. We appreciate the recognition that Ms. Shields showed in slide number 4 that the county's authority and responsibility to determine reasonable unreasonable environmental and economic effects pursuant to the Water Code, Section 1013. And we appreciate the opportunity to work with Ms. Shields coming up and discussing the new proposed fallowing program. And we've actually already set up a meeting to begin those discussions. As you know, the Air District is very concerned with any action that may create further PM10 to our area. Fallowing has the potential to do that if it's not properly mitigated. So we look forward to continuing to work with your staff and hopefully coming to you with a joint effort document that you can approve.
Okay. Any questions of Brad? Okay. Thanks, Brad. Mark?
Mark McBroom, Calapat, Imperial County Farm Bureau. We're here to comment again, as we reiterated, I think, a meeting or two ago, about our concern about the intent or appearance thereof of these waters that are no longer to be applied to the lands that are going into solar arrays. It is our policy from the Farm Bureau that this water remain in the water pool. As you know, we are in a underrun situation as it is, and I would strongly suggest to this board, as Mr. Silva suggested earlier, about talking about the WCAB regarding the fallowing issues, and I think we've been trying to meet on those issues, deviate a little bit off of this, to come up with some of these solutions to help in the interim. And we're going to maybe have to reinvent the wheel on that. But I would also ask if we would consider putting this in front of the WCAB as well, because this applies to the water users of Imperial County. The water users in Imperial County, or Imperial Valley for that matter, we covet this water. Without water applied to our land, or a minimal amount each and every year after our transfers are ramped up, our land will soon become nothing more than parking lots without the applied water. We're not looking to be in business as parking lots or construction fields. We're looking to produce crops, food and fiber and feed. And that's what Imperial County is known for. So therefore, we just strongly suggest and recommend to this board that it understands that whatever water, according to the state water code, is, and this is an Imperial Irrigation District, that municipalities are first and irrigation is second. And let's use these waters where their original intent was at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, any other comments? Okay, thank you, Tina. We'll move on to item number 4, Energy General Matters. Mr. Ivy.
Bill, just a couple of comments. Staff, Energy Department staff continues to take advantage of sub $3 pricing for natural gas. Last week I authorized $8.2 million in purchases. For the summer of 2012, we purchased gas at about $2.79, and that brings us roughly to 63% of the native local area generation. In 2013, we paid $3.61. That takes us to about 46% for summer of 2013. In 2014, we paid $4.07, and that takes us to about 29%. So as the price of gas continues to stay low and favorable, we're going to continue to try to take advantage of it for the benefit of the consumers.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Ivy on this issue? Anybody have any other questions of Mr. Ivy? Okay, thank you, Joe. We'll move on to item number 5, a transition plan for a 24-hour trading operation. And
I don't think the microphone's working again.
Yeah, Greg Merrigan, you're up.
After this one.
Test.
President Menville, members of the board. My name is Greg Merrigan. I'm a consultant working on energy matters for Kevin Kelly. Mr. Kelly tasked me to put together a business plan to transition energy marketing services currently performed by Coral to IID staff. This plan contains the input, review, and approval. Joel Ivy, Dan McCann, and Belen Valenzuela. We believe this is a very viable plan and it should provide great value to the IID. Analysis was performed in January of this year by the by the internal audit and risk manager on this Coral Energy Services contract. That analysis indicated a cost to IID of approximately $9 million every year due to non-optimal transactions. Coral is currently covering the real time on nights, holidays, and weekends, and they were given a 90-day termination notice on March 12th for this contract. The plan addresses staffing of the Iid merchant trading to expand to real-time trading 24 hours a day. Last week, an RFP was released to help mitigate exposure between time of cancellation of the Coral contract and the ability of Iid staff to manage that operation. This will require 6 positions. 4 are budgeted, 2 are unbudgeted. 4 of the positions will fill current vacancies on the day-ahead and real-time desk. And an additional 2 positions, which are new, will be trading analysts, which will provide a pipeline, internal pipeline of qualified applicants to relieve some pressure on the SOC for filling these positions. Interviews are currently underway for the day-ahead and real-time trading positions. Training is currently provided by Blue Water Energy Services and Applied Professional Training. We will expand that scope of work to train the new hires and the trading analyst. On-the-job training will also be provided by current staff and management. And due to going to 24-hour operations at the Ivy Plaza Mall, we need some security services, lighting, and cameras. We were concerned about risk to the Iid during the transition from the core contract to the ability of staff to handle 24-hour operations. So we released that RFP last week to cover any shift vacancies during that time. The initial term will be through the end of the year with an option by Iid to extend if necessary, if staff is not capable. Unbudgeted annual costs are approximately $281,000. That's $230,000 for the analyst positions and the security services. There is a one-time unbudgeted cost of $45,000 between lightings, camera, and additional training. If you assume a July 1st start date for the new analysts and the security services, the 2012 impact is $186,000. The schedule. Interviews are underway with 4 trading positions. The RFP was released last week. We expect to have the new energy services contract people on board by June 1. We expect to have the 4 traders on board by May 15th. And the contract for Coral expires June 12th. And the contract for the RFP energy services provider will run, like I said, through the end of the year with an option to extend.
Does anybody have any questions for Greg on this matter?
I've got a couple of questions and comments. Mr. Berrigan, the purpose of this transition plan was based on non-optimal transactions.
That is correct.
Which was basically transactions that were being handled by Coral.
That is correct.
Okay. I believe in moving forward with the RFP, it's very important that we remove those provisions which allowed that, which was buying and selling from their own company.
That is correct. Transparency will be key with the new contract.
So, I think any one that we award this to, we have to make sure that we're not opening up that same opportunity to purchase from themselves, basically, or sell.
That is correct.
Okay. However, in this process, and because the savings is based on this ability to rectify this, we would still be able to purchase from Coral Energy using
most definitely
outside traders, correct? If they had the best offer, the best deal at the moment, we could still trade with them. Is that correct?
Right. Either the energy services provider or the real-time traders will survey the market. If they're short, they'll buy power from the cheapest source. If they're long, they'll sell it to the highest bidder.
Okay. I call attention to page 120, second paragraph, where it says the RFP will provide a backstop to the functions Coral is currently providing. I think that wording needs to be modified. Okay?
Coral's gone.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have some comments. Along with the idea of that Director Hanks has touched on about the 6-month interim contract that's going to be providing the trading for us while we're training and building our own staff. I think it'd be wise if we made a deal besides the blue water training portion for our traders, that we send each trader that's going to be our trader analyst that's on the floor, I believe it's 11 or 12 positions, and spend a week with whoever's performing that 6-month contract. This is an additional cost and expense, but we're looking at upwards of $8 to possibly $9 million of savings a year by pulling this off and accomplishing this. So the blue water training's fine. The trading internally by the IID staff is fine, but it still doesn't expose our people to somebody in a 24-hour environment that has oversight and auditing and management from another angle, another look at it.
Right.
And then that's taken me into my next comment. I'm not seeing the management and oversight portion of this presentation. I'm sure it's there, but in the board agenda item, I'm not seeing it. And we need to define who the manager is going to be, who the subordinate management is going to be, who the players are going to be, how they're going to be checked on and audited while they're functioning, but more specifically, how they're going to be checked on during that training period of 6 months. We need an auditing, training, oversight, verification program by management to verify that the new and old staff that are being trained during the 6 months for the 24-hour real-time trading are in fact meeting some goals, some objectives, benchmarks to get there. And then with that said, if we're not there in 6 months, then those probationary people that are being hired to do this, we need to let them go because it didn't work, and we need to reevaluate our management team and our overall plan because we're going to be back on the market then with someone else that's going to be providing our 24-hour real-time training. The ID's kicked this subject around quite a few times over the years and have not been able to pull it off. And I'm very interested in seeing this be done successfully, and I know the rest of the board is also. I'm not seeing infrastructure in there, General Manager Kelly, about the management. I know there's a management resource planning and training that's going on. There's an assistant manager that's in there. How's that going to be structured? Who are the traders going to be reporting to? And that goes along the lines of representing and understanding FERC 888 and 889 and the SOC and that firewall. I don't see that in this plan, and I'd like to see all that information in the plan when it comes back for action. Training, administration management, auditing and verification that the training program is meeting the benchmarks and goals, and just a little bit more checks and balances and redundancy and oversight.
That's a fair point, and I think that we can revise the document before we bring it back to you. I do want to commend Mr. Merrigan in helping us to bring this forward. I think that I should point out to the board that this necessarily falls on the Human Resources Department to take this and to manage it, because you're right. We're touching on three critical departments, and the roles and responsibilities are going to be changing. That firewall that you talked about is one that I certainly want to keep intact. I do think that the board needs to be mindful that the 6-month bridge there is the ideal. I'd be fully prepared to extend if it gave me some measure of confidence that when we did go live, we had it that much more together.
Yeah, well, no, without a doubt, we need that flexibility. 6 months is a goal. If it's 9 months, even if it's a year, as long as we're making those successes along the way. If we're not making those successes, then there's something wrong with the plan, and we need to rethink it. The Blue Water training budget is what, $35,000?
40,000.
40. I know that's for such an important function and activity at the IED. I don't know, that seems a little bit light. I'm not saying to increase that blue water, but I am saying take a look at who's going to be supplying that interim 6-month contract. If they're a local outfit, great. We don't have to pay for hotel rooms and accommodations. If they're not local, we need to have insight into how someone else is functioning and performing this, ideally to pick up on their efficiencies, and then the IED can incorporate them and adopt them into our activities.
The board also needs to be aware that we have some fairly ambitious people in the energy department right now who are convinced that we can move right into launch and go live in June, and I don't want to stifle that ambition, but I have to be convinced myself that we have it completely together and that we can realize the savings that we've presented to you. So my predilection would be to take the maximum time as a bridge rather than the minimum. And I know that our resource planner, Belen Valenzuela, has been heavily involved in this effort to this point. And I would like to see her remain involved as we move forward.
Any further questions, Mr. Mayor? Are you good with everything, the way it's been going so far to date?
Yeah, I'm getting very good responses. You got a good team here.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, Stella's going to take a quick break. She'll be right back. We're going to move on to Finance, item number 6, request for service agreement with Moss Adams. Ed? Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Okay. Good afternoon, President Menville, members of the board. Today I'm here to inform you of a new service agreement request for Moss Adams to cover professional consulting services related to accounting and tax compliance. The service agreement is for $50,000, and while it is under the $200,000 limit required for board approval, we felt it was appropriate to bring it to you just so you get a chance to see it, and also because we have an existing service agreement with Moss Adams to cover external audit services. Now, this service agreement covers a previous service agreement that has now expired, so it's nothing new. It's ongoing services typically provided by your external audit firm. And you can see it there. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, I'll be back next week for approval.
Okay, any questions for Ed on this issue?
Ed, I understand that Moss Adams has been helping in some areas with some of the employees' tax and so forth.
Right.
But I'm very concerned about a service being provided by the same firm that's doing our auditing and has oversight responsibility. You're getting into a very gray area.
Well, typically, these types of services, which are advisory services, if they give us advice, it's our responsibility as management to make the decision to accept their advice or not to do so. But we do have to be careful not to cross over into anything that would be viewed as would impair their independence. So I understand your concern, and we'll make sure that we don't cross that line.
Any further questions of Ed from the board? Okay, Ed, thanks. You bring it back for action.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 7, review proposal to issue commercial paper for energy and water purposes. Mr. Broking.
I have a brief informational presentation today on our commercial paper program, and then we will bring it back next week for board action. Back in April 2007, the board approved a $200 million commercial paper program. And our current program consists of the following. We have tax-exempt Series A notes that have that can be issued up to a maximum of $200 million, and we have taxable Series B notes with a maximum of $50 million. In total, though, we can't exceed the $200 million. And then there's another restriction below that. Energy can never exceed $175 million, and water cannot exceed $75 million. And so the issuing and paying agent agreement that we're asking to be amended lays out the program parameters that are listed above. And so that agreement allows for an additional series of notes to be established by supplement to the issuing and paying agent agreement, and that will be a Series C notes. And we are restricted by issuing commercial paper by the amount of the letter of credit we currently have outstanding, and that is right now at $100 million. We have a $100 million letter of credit with Union Bank. There is no commercial paper currently outstanding with the Water Department, but there is $25 million outstanding in the Energy Department. So I mentioned just briefly a while ago that the Union Bank, we have a $100 million letter of credit, and that is restricted to $75 million for energy and $50 million for water, but the total cannot exceed $100 million. Now, we are, and we have been, trying to obtain an additional letter of credit up for $100 million. We've had several firms interested in providing that letter of credit, but we're still negotiating with them, and the market really hasn't been that kind to us for this type of service. More and more banks are pulling out of providing letters of credit. So it has been, I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it's been very time-consuming and tedious trying to get an additional letter of credit. So what we're proposing to the CP program is to add a new series of notes, Series C, up to $200 million that can be used either by energy or water, and then have them either be taxable or tax-exempt notes. The addition of these Series C notes does not increase the maximum program capacity of $200 million. We would just have the option of issuing Series A, B, or C notes, but no more than $200 million in total. And so next week, we will be bringing for action an authorizing resolution to establish Series C notes and a third amendment to the issuing and paying agent agreement.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Broking?
So, Greg, we're effectively raising the bar from $100 million where we're at of financing our obligation to a $200 million.
No, the program still allows, is currently limited to $200 million.
100 or 200?
200, but we can only issue paper right now for 100 because that's the only letter of credit we have. If we are able to find someone else who provide the additional letter of credit, we'd bring that back to the board for approval before we would be able to enter into that agreement.
Are there some projects on the horizon for you that you're looking at this need to raise the bar here?
Not specific projects, but there could be additional need in energies for some liquidity this year, and depending upon what transpires with the water transfer and when and if we borrow money under that program, this would provide liquidity for that also.
Any further questions of Mr. Brogan?
Do you anticipate this rolling over eventually into a bond?
Yes, depending on how much we borrow, but yes, if we for short-term and medium-term needs, we can borrow, I would say, maybe up to $50 million without rolling it over to a long-term bond. But if it got much above that, then at some point, yes, I think we'd take it out and issue long-term debt.
Okay, thank you, Greg. We're going to move on to that. We'll move into action, and the first item is number 8. But just a moment. No, he wants to get it in a normal. Okay, internal auditing, Betty.
President, members of the board. At present time, at the internal audit, we have 4 ongoing audits. They are in different stages. 3 of those audits are scheduled, and 1 of it is off schedule. We have the payroll audit, where we're gathering the data gathering is in process. We have the PCAR 2011 expenditures, audit fieldwork, and the report writing is in process. We had the inventory of energy stores in Imperial Valley. The report is ready to be sent out for management for their review. And our unscheduled audit of accounts receivable, collection write-off process, and policy compliance. We've finished writing the audit plan, and the gathering data is we're going to begin next week. And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Betty?
Okay, thank you, Betty.
We're going to move into item number 9, request by Director Hanks for pro forma of quantification settlement agreement pricing formulas. Mr. Hanks, you're going to take that?
At the last presentation by Mr. DeMars, he mentioned basically a couple of areas that we need to look at and maybe adjust our business plan on the QSA. And that had to do with the revenues from the revenues from the Fifth Amendment plus the state shortfall. But we have kind of an idea of what the state shortfall is, but we have no idea how much adjustments that we would need to make because of Amendment 5. And I think in the long term, we need to know that and start planning for it. And I'm asking if internal audits would take a look at it. It'd probably require you to work with Greg and maybe Rod Smith closely on the formulas to look at the difference in the deltas of those 2 revenue streams.
I think we can help internal audit out with your request. The QSA has multiple pricing formulas, and we can provide all that information. The compromise that you're talking about was a compromise of a dispute. When San Diego elected to go to the second pricing formula, which was based on METS rates, and we can provide that information to internal audit. Some of the stuff was a compromise of a dispute, so I'm not sure that there's a specific answer to some, or specific numerical answers, but I would leave that to internal audit to determine. But we'll provide all that information.
Okay. Would you, gee, that's an action item, huh?
Yes,
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, any comments? I have a couple of comments to make first. I think it's good that Director Hanks brought this forward because I believe this has to do with the $50 million that we got up front from San Diego County Water Authority. And there's people out there saying that we gave up money on the back end. And I've already had some of my political opponents trying to use this against me for re-election, and I'm sure they're going to be doing the same with Director Mendoza because it was a 3-2 vote when this came about by this board. So I welcome the investigation, and I welcome internal auditors looking at this, and whatever information that we can get, let's get it out there so that it's factual and the truth be known about what's going on with this so that people aren't out there saying things that do not hold water. All right. Any other comments?
No, I'm interested in some of these funds are targeted for the definite plan. And we know that the state, the amount that was budgeted by the state into the JPA was somewhere around $1.2 billion. If they're not going to fulfill that obligation, and we have to, in some sort of way, either backfill or renegotiate, we need to know exactly. But his main thing is on moving forward with a definite plan because some money this year is targeted for the definite plan. We need to know exactly what we're going to be able to afford and modify that program.
Most certainly.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I think it's good that we bring this forward and get the facts out on the table. Any other questions? Thank you, Betty. We'll move on to item number 10.
We needed to vote.
Oh, yeah, please vote. Ready. Number 10, approval of amendment number 1 to agreement with Charles T. DeMars.
Yes, President Minville, members of the board, this amendment is specifically for the work associated with the state board petition. And if you have any questions about it, I'll be happy to answer them.
Mr. Kelly, how much have we paid Mr. Damaris and his firm to date?
I believe the original service agreement was for $250,000, and we came to the board for an additional $100,000 for expert technical help.
So you would add to that amount this 462?
And I think it does. I believe that it calls that's for the balance of 2012.
For a year.
Yeah, I think.
From April.
Yeah, it represents 12 months of work.
David, on the not working again.
It's working.
It's working. Can you hear?
It's working.
On the number 2 items A through F, will they all be coming back to the board for vote? As far as before implementation, again, like before, I don't mind having a different opinion at the table, but before we conclude anything, I think is it going to come back for board vote?
I believe that everything listed here is subject to the advice and consent of the board.
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Brad, let me see, is there any further board comments after the motion? Brad, go ahead.
Thank you, President Minville. Just a clarification, in the agenda it says amendment number 1 as you read into the record, and then the backup says amendment 2. Is it amendment 2 or is it amendment 1? Amendment 2? Okay, thank you. In light of Mr. DeMars' informative presentation that he gave to your board a couple of weeks ago, and the fact that he emphasizes the need to work together with the county and the APCD, I think it would be appropriate on number 3 in the amendment if you could insert the County of Imperial and Imperial County Air Pollution Control District along with the environmental and irrigation communities.
Not a problem.
Certainly, no objection to that.
That in my motion.
Thank you.
The maker of the second's okay with that?
Oh, I second.
Yeah.
Who do you have down as official second? We both second.
Okay.
I got here.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Go ahead, Brad.
And then another item I'd like to bring up, and another measure of cooperation, since we're on that new pathway for, information sharing, communication.
Don't get all giggly about it, okay? It probably won't last.
Like to see if you could direct your council to cooperate in securing immediate briefing and trial of the environmental claims, because I think we both recognize that it's in our own common interest, both the IID and the county, to have them promptly resolved so that we can move forward. So I'm not asking you to change any positions. I'm just asking you to direct your council to assist in moving that case forward so that we can have solvency to the issue.
If you really want to talk about that, we should talk about that in closed session first. I'm not even sure what that means, but what I think it means is a lot more than what it sounds like.
He's asking in good faith. Okay, Brad.
I'm just asking your assistance to move it forward. Better late than never. We don't have time. Time isn't a luxury for us anymore.
Okay. Any other comments? Any comments from the public on this? Okay, please vote. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 11, adoption of a resolution in support of several projects by Global Energy Holding, Alternative Renewable Resources in Imperial Valley.
Move to approve.
Second? I'll second it. Is there any questions from the board? Okay, please vote. Thank you. We'll move on to energy, number 12. Memorandum of Understanding with San Diego Gas and Electric related to proposed partial participating transmission ownership facilities with IID Balancing Authority. Mr. Kelly.
Yes, President Menville, members of the board.
Mr. Kelly, is your mic on?
My mic is not on. I've been advised that we should pretend that the mics are working because
Well,
they
you have
are
to speak louder. I can barely hear you.
I will try again.
I'll turn. Is your red light on?
It is.
Okay, go ahead.
Now that I cut you off track, Eugene.
President Menville, members of the board. This matter has been before you before. The documents have changed substantially since you last took them up. I would ask your indulgence as we call on Attorney William Kissinger, who's been assisting my office and your board throughout this process, to describe in brief the substantive changes that are reflected in these documents now.
Mr. Kelly and board and the audience, I'll be recusing from this participation.
Certainly.
President, members of the board, I'll be very brief in describing the MOU and focus on the changes that have been made since it was last presented.
You'll want to be very loud, too, by the way.
And I'll be very loud in doing so. The memorandum of understanding, the MOU, is between IID and San Diego Gas and Electric. It's a non-binding memorandum, the purpose of which is to explore preparing a set of materials in collaboration with the California Independent System Operator, which would create two facilities that would be the collector stations for a series of PV solar projects in the vicinity of the existing Imperial Valley substation. The purpose of the MOU is to set up what we're referring to as a partial PTO. The idea would be to create two facilities which would be jointly owned by San Diego Gas and Electric and IID, which, if we were successful in our efforts with the independent system operator, would create a situation where IID would be taking the lead for future interconnections at these 2 points of interconnection in the vicinity of the Imperial Valley substation. As we've talked about in the past, it's by no means certain that we'll be able to successfully go through the regulatory process, which would in the end result in these facilities being placed under the operational control of the independent system operator, but which we would have a 50% ownership in. We've spent a great deal of time since first presenting this MOU to address the questions that you rightly raised as to what happens if we are unsuccessful. That's where the fundamental thrust of the changes have been made to the MOU since it was last presented. For purposes of describing the output from the MOU, there would be 2 collector stations, one to the north of the Imperial Valley substation, one to the south and east of the Imperial Valley substation. The one to the north, which we refer to as the IV collector switchyard, would be built by, or it would be built by one of the developers as building a PV solar project, and then under the terms of the MOU and additional terms to be negotiated with them would be a build-own-transfer transaction whereby IID would take ownership of it, and later SDG&E would take an interest in it, 50% interest in it, upon it becoming a network facility, and by that means connecting in the existing S line that comes from the north, as well as extending a line from the Dixieland substation down to the IV collector switchyard. In the event that the MOU is unsuccessful in creating a partial PTO, it would be owned by IID and there would be no change. On the other hand, the other collector station, which is referred to as the Drew switchyard, would be in the first instance would be built by one of the developers, and then under the similar build-own-transfer structure, transferred to SDG&E. The concern was, as expressed by the board, what happens if we do not establish a partial PTO successfully with the ISO, and SDG&E is left with essentially a larger footprint than the one it has currently at the Imperial Valley substation. What the MOU does in terms of changes are focusing on what happens with the arrangements with the Drew substation. And the changes concentrate on making sure that the size of that footprint becomes no larger than it currently is in the event that our efforts at the ISO and ultimately at FERC are unsuccessful. The key changes are found in sections 1.5 and 1.6 of the MOU, although there are other changes throughout to conform the MOU. What they do is they make plain that IID is providing a limited license to the parties negotiating with in terms of the access rights and the right-of-ways that they need both to travel in the instance of the Sea Solar project and the AES 8-minute energy projects, which are to the south of the Drew substation, the amount of megawattage that they can move up the generation tie line that's being constructed to connect them with the Drew switchyard. Similarly, limitations will be made on the crossing rights that these parties and ultimately another party, LS Power, which will be given an easement across the West Side Main Canal, so that at the end of the day, the amount of megawattage that can actually move from the Drew switchyard ultimately up to the IV substation will be limited to 800 megawatts until such time as we're satisfied with the arrangements that are in place or we are able to put in place the partial PTO structure that we're talking about with SDG&E and ultimately the California ISO.
Can you explain to me on page .16, it says the license will be amended to remove the 585 megawatts limitation provided doing so. What does that mean?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. So the line coming from the south for those specific projects, and that's the Sea Solar project and the AES 8-minute energy project, collectively are authorized to move 585 megawatts up to the Drew substation and no more. It's essentially a speed limit on that line. The additional increment that would go from the Drew substation to IV is the contribution that the LS Power project would put in at the north. And when you add their output, and I'm terrible at math. 215, you would get the 800 total number.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Kelly. I had asked you to provide a white paper to the board, and you provided a very detailed white paper to the board. And there were some questions being asked by this board as far as giving up the control of a balancing authority and so forth. And I couldn't find my white paper. I would want, if you could address some of the concerns that were raised at that time. And I was hoping you had like a
PowerPoint. A PowerPoint.
A PowerPoint, yeah. PowerPoint that we could ask those specific questions that were being asked.
I've got it with me. I can at least put it in front of me and walk through the questions.
Would you please? Because there's questions that are still have not been answered to the satisfaction of some of the board members, and so I would like for you yourself to answer those questions, and for my benefit as well.
Yeah, my apologies for not having a PowerPoint presentation.
Well, next time I hope you do.
That's okay. So again, my apologies for not having it available to put in front of the board. So I think one of the key concerns that have been raised is that by heading down this road, by essentially entertaining the concept of providing a direct interconnection to the ISO, that there's an encroachment that's being made into the IID system that in the effect is going to undercut the IID system and weaken the IID system to maintain a balancing authority. What we're doing here is limited really to the unique circumstance that's created by the Southwest Power Link, the existing Southwest Power Link that comes through Imperial County with the Imperial Valley substation that's located here. As evidenced by the way parties are preferentially interconnecting in one location or around the IV substation, but not generically through the Imperial County. It's a reflection of the differing business models that exist in terms of how transmission is paid for. And it's a longstanding institutional problem that IID is spending serious attention at redressing so as to level the playing field in some fashion. But in the meantime, there are multiple interconnection customers that have made their requests to the ISO and who seek...
Thereby bypassing the IID system.
And the question is this a problem that is going to be perpetuated throughout Imperial County and throughout the IID system? Because, you know, if that's what happens, you have a transmission system which increasingly becomes a stranded asset, which will be borne by your ratepayers and not by the generators that are currently making use of it. So it is a serious existential risk that IID has to address. What IID has done, and I absolutely commend the board for its leadership on this score, is it's creating an environment where projects that have spent many years trying to come to final resolution with their permitting, with the gauntlet that they have to run in order to get power purchase agreements approved by the PUC, has decided not to stand in the way of these projects being developed. And it's creating a means by which these projects can interconnect with the ISO as they're obliged to under their contractual terms. The issue for the long term for IID is how to make other areas in its territory more easily interconnectable, if you will, to the rest of the transmission grid, and these are going to be these stem from problems which are long-standing in nature, historical in nature. Will take efforts by IID at the PUC, at the ISO, but they are surmountable. What we're doing here is just one small corner of the state, and the MOU is specifically designed to make sure that this fix that we're doing in the vicinity of the Imperial Valley substation is not a model that will be used throughout the entirety of the IID district.
What guarantee do we have that it will not be?
I think economics are ultimately the best guarantee that we have. There's a cost to building transmission. It's very expensive to build. And the question that the state has to ask itself, that state policymakers have to ask themselves is, does it make sense to build a redundant transmission system to the one that exists purely because the transmission system that would be built has the label ISO on it and not IID on it? But that is an important part of what we're doing here. This is only one small piece of the puzzle. It's to deal with the exigencies we have right now in order to prevent many hundreds of millions of dollars, indeed billions of dollars investment from being thwarted. But a bigger fix has to be undertaken, one which deals with an existing transmission system which could be reinforced, needs to be reinforced in order to accommodate all this new generation, and should be.
If our transmission system had been reinforced, would that have could that have prevented the bypass that's happening today? Could we have forced these generators to hook up to our transmission system if it had been reinforced for that capacity?
I think the answer is no. I mean, the problem is that the investor-owned utilities, which are the major customers for these projects, don't have to choose any one location for their projects, and they'll look for wherever they can get the best price, the best attributes to the generation. And one of the problems is that there's added transmission costs coming out of IID. That's surmountable, but there are also qualities that the IOUs look for in the energy they purchase. One of those qualities, if you will, is that it can count towards resource adequacy. And there are limits to how much power can move from one balancing authority to another based on historical patterns, which in the past have resulted in what is referred to as the maximum import capability from IID as zero. And so the IOUs, which are buying the power, are preferentially buying it from locations outside of IID because they can't get resource adequacy credit, or they can't get full resource adequacy credit. They'll buy it from another location. Those are problems that can be fixed but haven't been fixed yet. I think I mentioned in closed session that the ISO last week released its 2011-2012 transmission plan last week on Friday. One of their priorities is to increase that maximum import capability from the IID balancing authority to 1,400 megawatts. That's going to require both some physical upgrades on their system. It's also going to require some changes in their tariff. But those things can be done, and it can make IID a more attractive place for developers to locate, or I should say, for IOUs to purchase from. There's also things that the PUC could do on this score, and it's our intention to talk to the PUC. So in the end, I don't believe that IID can order developers to connect to its system. I do believe that a better environment can be created in which they'll want to locate here. And it is absolutely the case that IID offers enormous opportunities for renewable development insofar as it has vast acreages of disturbed land as opposed to undeveloped desert lands. And it's got geothermal resources, which in terms of what's going to be needed on a going forward basis in terms of renewable generation, I believe will be very, very attractive in the future. What
were some of the other questions that were asked that you answered in your white paper, Mr. Kissinger?
Yeah. So one of the questions is, what is IID getting out of entering into this MOU? Why is this a good idea for IID? That's hard to say. I believe that this is not an action by the board which is really motivated by IID's self-interest, but really motivated by what is in the best interest of the state and advancing the state's objective of 33% renewables. There is, I don't believe, harm done to its ratepayers by doing this. That's one of the concerns, that its ratepayers are getting nothing out of it.
How can you say that if they're not going to pay wheeling charges? They're not going to pay the tariff. How could there be no harm to our ratepayers?
I think that's a fair question, Director Mendoza. I think the answer to that is it presumes that these projects would nonetheless go forward with their development if we told them you have no choice. You need to develop. You need to interconnect to our system. The problem is that the developers are basically between a rock and a hard place. They have PUC approved PPAs, and they're obliged to develop projects, at least as those PPAs are developed and drafted right now, that require them to connect to the ISO system. If we were to say, well, we're very sorry, but our system is here and ready to accommodate you, it would be an enormous amount of effort and time for them to renegotiate the arrangements they've got in place. And I do believe that many, if not all, of those projects would have to start all over again because they wouldn't be able to easily make those changes. There are also other issues that would prevent them from readily connecting to the IID system as it is today. These facilities are very large. They're intermittent in nature, and so they're erratic in terms of their output. And the IID, or whatever balancing authority that they interconnect to, needs to provide balancing services for them. They need to have adequate reserves. The balancing authority needs to have adequate reserves to deal with the ups and downs that these kinds of facilities, by definition, have. And the problem for IID is it's a small balancing authority with relatively few reserves. Would have a very difficult time providing those balancing services. Now, there are things that can be done to deal with that. The ISO recently put in place a tariff that allows for it to act as a balancing authority, even though it's not the native balancing authority where the generation comes from. It's known as a pseudo-tie arrangement. So it could be done. But it comes back to my point that it would be exceedingly difficult at this point to put the arrangements in place, not just on the developer side, but also on our side, to be able to ensure that they could actually go forward with their projects, which comes back to your question in terms of foregone wheeling charges. It presumes that these projects would be able to go forward with development. If they don't come online, there would be no wheeling charges. And that, I think, is the reality, certainly for these projects here. I think on a going forward basis, if the right environment is created where the disparity between interconnecting on the IID system versus interconnecting on the ISO system is moderated, and policymakers are providing the right signals to make the IOUs or incent the IOUs to have projects locate here, or the resources here are sufficiently valuable that parties are willing to bear those costs, and I should say the IOUs are willing to bear those costs, that development will happen.
What other questions were raised in your white paper that need to be addressed?
One of the other questions was whether or not by doing this is essentially the end of the IID balancing authority, that it's sort of an unlimited encroachment on the IID balancing authority. And there, what we did in the MOU was we made very plain that what we're doing here is for these specific facts, the fact that we've got an SDG&E substation located in the middle of Imperial County, that we would go forward with the partial PTO application at FERC and very much make plain that a conditioned precedent to doing this is that FERC acknowledges that it is limited to these facilities only and no more. Elsewhere in the IID system, and I'll talk about Salton Sea because that's an area we talked before about being an area rich for development.
Before you continue,
yes, ma'am.
We're trying to help the state. Where is the state helping us with the Salton Sea?
That, I believe, is where we should be spending some time.
Just a comment.
And a well-taken one. But the goal of the MOU is to make it focused on this one area, and it's going to be a condition for approval by the Commission, by FERC. And it's limited, ultimately, geography limits its scope. You can build lots of radial lines off, I suppose. The question is whether that's a cost-effective thing to do. That's what we're going to be working on. I mean, there was a proposal for a very long radial line to be built up to the Salton Sea from IV, submitted by two developers on the Salton Sea. And the ISO rejected that. That was in their report issued 2 weeks ago now. Obviously, there's going to be appetite to try and develop projects that are worth developing and connect them in the most inexpensive fashion possible.
In other words, you're saying there are going to be projects that are going to try to bypass our transmission system. People
are certainly going to try, and it's our job here to set up an environment where people will want to connect to us. And one of the things we need to deal with is that there are two totally different ways of funding transmission in the ISO versus IID. In IID, we make generators pay for the transmission development, and we pay them back in transmission credits, but they pay wheeling charges to make use of the system. In the ISO, generators pay for it, but they're paid back in cash. If they're connecting to the SDG&E system, they're paid back immediately upon reaching commercial operation, and all the costs of the transmission are borne by the ratepayers. So what we need to do is set up a circumstance where transmission, which is frankly for the benefit not of IID's ratepayers, but for the ISO's ratepayers, ultimately bear that transmission cost. And the partial PTO is one small way of doing that, but we want to, for the broader scope of things, since we don't want to join the the ISO, we don't want to become a full-fledged PTO as to all of our facilities. We want to put in place arrangements where the ISO ultimately bears the cost of transmission that is benefiting their ratepayers. The FERC issued an order some months ago, Order 1000, which is aimed at precisely this issue, recognizing that when you have differing business models for financing transmission, for us through wheeling charges, in the ISO done through what's called the transmission access charge that ratepayers pay, you get these perverse outcomes where you just have development around, in this case, the IV sub. We need to normalize things, and this discussion comes at a good time. So the MOU is not the model for the solution. The MOU is really to deal with the circumstances that we confront today. But it's only a small part of a much bigger problem.
If I can, Mr. Kissinger, I don't want to leave the impression that IID is considering entering into such an agreement for the betterment of the state.
Hell no.
That is a laudable goal. But, Mr. Nahai, I wonder if you might expound on what you see as maybe the top three reasons that IID ought to be doing this, despite the fact that it's not obviously our preferred way to go.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. President, board members. Thank you for extending to me the privilege of sharing some comments with you on this. And I just want to take a second or two to commend you on the vigilance that you've demonstrated throughout this whole process of the care with which you protect IID's balancing authority. And I also wanted to acknowledge General Manager Kelly's leadership throughout this. But I think we need to kind of go back to basics a little bit and take a look at just where we are. I mean, there is a reason why these developers have tried to bypass the IID balancing authority to begin with. Obviously, had they had a more attractive choice, they would have exercised that. And we've now been advised by lawyers, and I'm not your lawyer in this instance, I'm your consultant, but I've been told by more than one lawyer that but for the West Side Canal and our ability to control the license to cross that canal, we would not have had a legal right, to stand in the way of what has been this practice of bypassing. I think IID has correctly exercise that right, but by doing that, IID has brought this matter to a head. This whole issue of how the IOUs and the POUs and CalISO can possibly work together and find solutions so that we can overcome exactly the two business model problem that plagues us and will stand in the way of us developing transmission in the most optimal way. So with respect to these 800 megawatts, it's my view that it would not be prudent for IID to stand in the way of those 800 megawatts going forward. Let's face it, they've been through the county process, they've obtained their permits, they have PPAs, and but for the West Side Canal and this issue of the encroachment, we wouldn't have the right to stop them in any event. So I think the first issue is to find a way of allowing those projects to proceed, because they're for, after all, the benefit of Imperial County. They bring jobs, they bring economic development.
How many local jobs are they bringing?
I don't know what the exact number of that is, but in terms of spurring development within the county, they certainly do that. But at the same time, you want to make sure that doing that doesn't in any way jeopardize the IID balancing authority. You've been very clear in your instructions to Mr. Kissinger to make sure that does not occur. And he has ensured that by first making sure that the ability to cross is restricted to 800 megawatts. And secondly, obtaining from SDG&E a commitment in the MOU that it will not encroach further into the IID balancing authority. Now, that obviously does not solve the problem, because there are many other developers that are, that want to get their projects built, and they want to interconnect to transmission.
Hi, can you guarantee me there's going to be a firewall around these projects and the rest of our balancing authority?
Yeah, again, you're asking me a legal question, which I'm reticent
Then
to
I'll ask
answer.
Mr. Kissinger when he comes back.
Kissinger that. But now the question is, having done that, having restricted it to 800 megawatts, having obtained this promise from SDG&E that it won't encroach further, the question now becomes, what more are we to do? So we've already started, and I think General Manager Kelly explained this to you a little earlier on, an outreach program in which we've spoken with thought leaders and legislators in Sacramento. We'll be talking to PUC and many others. First of all, to present the case for IID, and the fact that throughout all of this, there has been only one PPA given to a generator within the IID balancing
They're paying
authority.
through the nose with the tariff and the RA issue, and these guys are getting off scot-free.
Well, yeah, so only one project. So we need to make sure that we overcome the regulatory hurdles. This whole issue of the different business models, the RA issue, the fact that the PUC commissioner issued a commissioner's ruling that there should be at least 1,400 megawatts being procured from IID territory. I think the wording was that it would be unreasonable for IOUs not to procure 1,400 megawatts from the IID territory. So we need, on the one hand, to continue to push the regulators and the decision makers to get rid of the hurdles to the export of our power, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we put in an economic structure ourselves here. And the wheeling rate, the 67% reduction, is certainly a very good place to start. That sends, I think, a very powerful signal. But there are other things that we can do in cooperation with the county in order to make sure that not only is the regulatory climate inducive to developers developing and exporting within IID, but that the economic factors are there to support those decisions as well. So,
thank you.
Mr. Kissinger.
Any other questions in your white paper that there was concerns about on this with this board? I'm at a.
Yeah,
you have the advantage. I couldn't find my.
I think you touched on it, but the precedent-setting part of it. I mean, I think ultimately the biggest and the hardest question that this board faces is whether doing this begins us down a road where there are multiple additional parallel lines created, which will take away not only new interconnection customers, but the existing ones, the existing generators that you have, and then the costs of your transmission system are increasingly borne on the shoulders of your ratepayers instead of your generators. And that is, I think, an absolutely legitimate concern. It's one that I think will gain purchase with policymakers that we'll be talking to make sure that what we're doing here is limited because of the circumstances that are driving it. And I do think that to the question that you ask, Director Mendoza, what does IID get out of it? I think what IID gets out of it, in addition to the economic benefits that the county derives, what I think IID gets out of it and should get out of it is that it is willing to work creatively to deal with serious problems that other people have to advance the goals of the state, and policymakers in the state should look to us to work with us.
That doesn't wash with me. I'm not particularly friendly with the state at this time because we have the Salton Sea in our county, and the Salton Sea, the state has abandoned Imperial County as far as I'm concerned in the IID. So wanting to work with the state to do something positive for the state, don't even go there at this time.
Yeah, I would say that there's a case to be made. This is one of the most impoverished counties in the state. And it's pretty hard, I think, for policymakers to close their eyes to it. And I know that the president of the Public Utilities Commission would take that very seriously. I know folks in the governor's office would take that very seriously. And I do believe that we have established our bona fides, that we're a serious player in trying to come up with creative workmanlike solutions.
I understand what you're saying, and you know, we're like they say, between a rock and a hard place, and I don't like being in this position at all.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. What are you going to do?
Yeah. I agree.
Okay. Are you done going through the MOU?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I know we're supposed to take board action. Does somebody want to move forward with this, and then we'll have discussion by the board, or does the board want to have further discussion on this?
I just want to echo the same comments as Director Mendoza. It's very noble of your words, but what is leading me to the decision is, one is the fight against the state. If we don't, and in the historic proposition of the PTO, therefore negating a fight with the state that we're not allowing renewables to leave Imperial County, as well as the jobs in Imperial County, and everything else that comes with this particular MOU, not necessarily to meet the state's, although I am from California and I do wish our state the best, but at the same time, our duty is to our ratepayers here in Imperial County, and again, it's not necessarily it's to help meet the goal, but it's the other stuff that comes with it, which is a backstop, which is not knowing the end result if we don't move forward with this with the state. Will they come in and et cetera, and of course the jobs and green energy that come with these contracts. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with San Diego Gas and Electric related to propose partial participating transmission ownership regarding facilities within IID's balancing authority 145, or item number 12.
Okay, is there a second? I'll second it.
Well, you second it then.
Okay, then is there a discussion by the board, Director Hanks?
Yes. Having lived in the Imperial Valley all my life, I've been prepared for situations like this. If you worked in the school district in Imperial County, anywhere in Imperial County, you would have been prepared also. An organization called the CIF would have prepared you. You see, we're the Davids down here, and we get to compete against the Goliaths. And when it comes to a championship round, for an Imperial Valley team to win, you have to be extremely extraordinary in your performance. Because you see, the championship games are set up on neutral fields. Neutral field means 10 miles from our competitor and 140 miles from us. That's neutral. So I've had 20-some years in preparation for this. So I want to give a little bit of history, and you just try to bear with me. The Plumes Review came up whenever the Green Path line started coming over. And the purpose of the IID at that time, our purpose was to keep it from connecting to our existing generators. So we said, look, stop it off out here in the desert somewhere. We'll provide hubs out to you. We'll bring the energy to you. We'll cooperate. In the meantime, we've ran up against different obstacles along the way. One of the obstacles was resource adequacy. We were an importer, not an exporter. But the assigning commissioner sent us a letter stating, well, we're going to give you credit for 1,400 megawatts. Well, in the meantime, let it suffice to say that we have 150 megawatts approved to hook up to the IID grid that requires the RA issue. We have 2 geothermals that receive PPAs that are going to Salt River, if I'm not wrong in my assumption there. So somewhere along the line, the protection that we had to build out these hubs was lost in the exchange of general managers. I'm not going to lay this in Mr. Kelly's lap. Mr. Kelly he's got his back. He's fighting just as hard as the rest of us. Where do we stop this encroachment? The strategic plans that we develop have not been put in place. If you ask the existing staff now, I don't think they even know where they're at or what the plan was. But after we moved from this resource adequacy, then we were told, well, we got this pancaking effect where our charges on top of additional charges dealt an uncompetitive number to the generators. And I believe that was correct. We worked on that, and it took over a year for our staff to get it to us. And I'm going to lay a lot of this right out on the staff. It took over a year from the date that we were promised to get us an economic rate. Would that have made a difference? I really don't know, because I think it's deeper than that. And I don't hold it against the developers that are here today. The developers, whenever they went to get a PPA in order to develop, they were basically told, you got to hook direct into us or there's no PPA. There's no project. Okay? Now, in my simple mind, I think that's a little bit of unfair practice. But that's exactly what's happening. So we battle up the state, we get the RA issue resolved, we come up with an economic development rate to make our generators competitive. We have probably the best geothermal resource in the country, and we can't seem to get PPAs because where they're at currently, they would have to connect to the IID grid. So my question is, after this, is that for us to be able to get contracts for our PPAs, are we going to have to forego another encroachment before we can get purchase power agreements? The battle that we're assuming out here, and I call it a battle, it's down to now, it's not prevention, it's containment. How do we contain it? How do we approve these projects that have spent literally millions of dollars to move their projects forward, permits, and so forth, for the benefit of the state of California and the urban dwellers, the urban ratepayers? Outside of mitigation to hook up to us and use the canals and so forth, there's not one penny flowing to the IID that benefits our ratepayers. Not one penny. So all this time we're helping the state of California. But those of you, my neighbors that live here, you know what it's like. You know, we live month to month, job to job. We get to play championship ball games on neutral fields. You know, and this is another case where we're playing with the state of California, and they call this a neutral field. And so here we are now with our backs to the wall. You know, they didn't kick off from the 30-yard line. They put it on our 1-yard line. And they're trying to score. And rightfully so. They have investments and so forth. But what about our ratepayers down here? When do we get the benefit? When do we go to Sacramento and look the governor in the face, who got 62% of the vote here, look PUC in the eye, and say foul? Or use a term that we say when we pass the feedlots here. Because that's what's happening. They're promised all these things as long as they get the resource and we provide it. It's like we're down here in the armpit of California and it doesn't matter. We don't qualify. We shouldn't have a decent living. We shouldn't have a decent wage. We shouldn't have the benefits the rest of the state of California has. We're fighting them all off. So when you take a look at these options, at first I was upset because I had worked with some of these developers on the north end and talked with them and introduced them to landowners that I thought had marginal ground or unused ground. And all of a sudden that disappeared. And so then I start thinking, well, the bypass is more money in their pocket. No, there's no money, period, if they don't bypass us. There is no project if they don't bypass us. So now, what are the options? Well, there was other options. The state of California, CalISO, San Diego Gas and Electric, they could have worked with us on dynamic scheduling. They still could have been in control of their organization, and we would have been in control of ours. But you start looking at the build-out and the plans, and as you can tell, we have good attorneys because they can answer the question without answering it. This is just the beginning. There'll be a line comes right off that IV sub, and it'll go right on out there. And there's other projects besides these that we're approving today. There's other projects that will be hooking up. They'll be bypassing. Come time for geothermal. And we have one on the agenda today, whether we develop it ourselves so we can control and get some return on our transmission, et cetera, or do we turn it over to fortunately we have two of the most prolific geothermal organizations, probably three most prolific geothermal organizations in the world here that are interested in our resources. But is it going to come down to where we're pressured that we have to allow another bypass come in to get that geothermal out? Where does it stop? When does it stop? Now, they say our prices are too high, but there's a couple of contracts signed with Arizona. So, from where we're at, I got to commend Mr. Kelly, I commend the attorneys, I commend this board for where they're at. Okay? It's just my nature not to quit. If you have a project and you don't hook up to the IID grid, then I am voting no. And it's not a reflection on you as a developer. It's a time for this county and these people, for our employees, to go to Sacramento and say, we've had enough. 1,400, you have 1,400 RA, and we end up with 150. We don't even have sufficient projects hooking into our system to upgrade Path 42 to get our geothermal out of here. And we all know there's a large number of jobs. We know it's a great tax base. We know that it is compatible with the ag industry here. So I just want you to know why I'm voting no. I'm not against these projects. I just think that they should have hooked up to the Imperial Valley. And the people that didn't insist that they hooked up, we'll have a few words out on the street. I'll still be defending that 1 yard goal line. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hanks. I'll just make a couple of comments. I understand where Director Hanks is coming from. And ID's in a very tough situation on this situation that we're in, but I said at an earlier meeting, thank God that the pioneers built the West Side Main Canal. Agriculture brought water here. That stopped them. This board voted 5 yes to not allow them to cross the West Side Main Canal. That brought San Diego to the table, brought the ID to the table, brought the governor's office to the table, even brought Cal ISO and probably the PUC to the table. So this is all going to happen in a very organized manner. The megawatts are limited. We're doing the right thing. We have to move forward to the future. The future's coming, and we have to make sure that the ID does protect itself, does protect its balance and authority. That's where Mr. Kissinger and Mr. Nahide come in, working with the general manager and our legal staff, and I think they've all done an outstanding job to get us to this point in time. And enough of that from me. I will be voting yes. I don't know if anybody in the public has any comments on this matter. If you do, step up to the podium. Otherwise, I'm going to call for the vote. Please vote. Not on this. You don't have it. You have a comment on this, Jim?
This MOU? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, come on forward.
I'm Jim Turner. I'm Senior Vice President with Energy Source. I don't pretend to understand all the ramifications of this MOU, but I can tell you as a ratepayer, the former general manager of Cal Energy and Magma Power before that I think you must contain the encroachment into the IID Balancing Authority. Now, I understand there's a need for compromise once in a while, and maybe down south is when you need to do it, but you've got to stop the encroachment elsewhere. I just recently signed up for 100 megawatts on Path 42. It's not even on the Oasis yet, I don't think. Is it, Jamie? Just completed the transaction a week or so ago so that I could move some of my future power of the geothermals that we want to develop out through Path 42. Now, I know there's the IOUs and other outfits that don't want to pancake cost, and I can certainly understand that. But I don't want to see the balancing authority deteriorate, because when we have a stranded asset out here, it'll eventually, probably long after I'm gone, but it will decay. And those developers that are left with operating plants that will have to belly up to the bar to replace it are probably going to end up folding because they can't afford it. Now, when I was with Magma Power, Unical, and I think Ormat, I know Bob's here, put up most of the money for the FACA line. That was years ago because there wasn't a good line to get that power out. We ponied up to the bar, put the money up, the line fell down, got it rebuilt, got through all of that, but it's remained a viable line. If we continue to see encroachment, we're going to see these lines not continue to grow, and Path 42 needs to grow so that we have a viable outlet going to the north on that route. And I would encourage you to contain what you can, compromise when you need to compromise, but do whatever you need to do to keep the remainder of the balancing authority viable. As a ratepayer here in Imperial County, one of the things I really like is IID rates. Most of that is because we're managing our own system. The minute that we start losing that, we might as well go live in Edison's or SDG&E's area and pay 3 times the rate for electricity. So from a ratepayer standpoint, and actually from Energy Source, I would encourage you to contain as much as you can on the future encroachment. Like I said, compromise where you need to compromise to help ensure the viability of the IID overall resource here, but keep that in mind. That's very important to all of us that live here. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Carolyn, did you have something you want to say?
No.
Okay.
I'm going the wrong way.
All right.
So maybe you get after Scaroni.
I just wanted to stress the point that was brought up earlier, that you need to keep the
what's best for the people that live here topmost in your mind, and not what is the best for the state of California.
All right. And for the record, that's Carolyn Allen. Okay. Any other comments from anybody? All right. Please vote. All right. Thank you.